The Nirvana Sutra, Chapter 1, Longevity, Part 1. Thus I have heard. At one time the Buddha was between a pair of sal trees by the banks of the Ajiravati River in Kusinagara, the native land of the Mala people. At that time the world-honored one was together with monks numbering what seemed like 8 trillion and surrounding him on all sides. It was the 15th day of the second month, and he was about to pass into Nirvana. Using his supernatural powers, the Buddha spoke out in a great voice so loud that it filled the world, reaching even to the highest heaven in the triple world. Projecting a variety of sounds, he spoke to living beings in every quarter, saying, "Today, the Tathagata, the one worthy of offerings, the perfectly enlightened one, is filled with compassion towards living beings, protects living beings, and looks equally upon all living beings, as if he were looking upon his own son Rahula. He creates rooms and houses of refuge for them. The world-honored one of the great enlightenment is about to enter Nirvana. If there is anyone among you with doubts regarding the teachings, you should ask your question now, as this will be your last opportunity for questions." At that time, in the early morning, the world-honored one emitted from his mouth a variety of rays of light. This light was multicolored, blue, yellow, red, white, crystal, and emerald, and it shone throughout the 3,000 great thousand Buddha worlds, reaching similarly into all 10 directions. Living beings in all 6 realms that encountered it had their transgressions, impurities, and defilements eliminated entirely. Those who saw and heard these things felt great sorrow. Simultaneously, they raised their voices in a doleful cry, "O compassionate Father, how distressing, how awful this is!" Some raised their hands in the air, slapped their foreheads, pounded their chests, and screamed. Others felt their bodies tremble. Some cried, and others were choked with tears. At that time, the earth, mountains, and great oceans all began shaking. The people said to each other, "For the time being, let us restrain ourselves, and not grieve so. Rather, we should go quickly to Kusinagara, the land of the Mallas, and upon reaching the Tathagata, bow our heads in respect and beseech him, saying, 'O Tathagata, please do not pass over into Parinirvana. Stay in the world for one more kalpa, at least something close to a kalpa.'" They joined hands and exclaimed, "The world will become empty. Living beings will find their blessings depleted, and impure karma will only increase. Everyone, let us go quickly, quickly. The Tathagata will surely enter Nirvana before long." They said, "This is well. The world is empty, the world is empty. From now on we will have no one to rescue us, no one to honor. We will be destitute and defenseless. Once the peerless world-honored one is gone, to whom will we direct our questions should doubts arise?" At that time, there were innumerable great disciples of the Buddha present, including Venerable Mahakatyayana, Venerable Vakula, Venerable Upananda. When they encountered the radiance of the Buddha, the bodies of these great bhikshus began to quiver until they were seized by an uncontrollable shaking. Their minds grew turbid, they became disoriented, and they raised their voices in a loud cry. They were stricken with a variety of troubles like this. At the time, 8 million monks were also assembled, and all were arhats. Their minds were freed, their tasks were accomplished, and they were free of defilements. And they had tamed their cognitive senses. Like the great dragon kings, they possessed great spiritual power. Accomplished in the wisdom of emptiness, sunyata, what they had gained personally was akin to a sandalwood grove, with rows of sandalwood trees in every direction. They were like lion kings surrounded by prides of lions. Thus it can be said that these monks had achieved an incalculable amount of merit and virtue, and every one of them was a true child of the Buddha. As the sun began to rise in the early morning sky, the monks emerged from their lodgings and were cleaning their teeth when they came upon the Buddha's light. They said to each other, "Quickly, rinse your mouths and wash your hands." After this exchange, their hair stood on end all over their bodies, and their blood flowed so strongly that they looked like the scarlet palasa flowers. Tears filled their eyes, and they felt great discomfort. wanting to give blessings and peace of mind to living beings, to accomplish the primary Mahayana practice of emptiness, to reveal the recondite teaching, summarily, that is, the Tathagata's skillful means, to prevent the extinction of his sermons, and to provide causes and conditions for living beings to discipline themselves, the monks rushed to where the Buddha was and bowed down at his feet. Circumambulating him 100,000 times, they then placed their palms together in reverence, withdrew, and sat at one side. At that time, from among the Kundala women, Subhadra, Upananda, Sigaramati, and 6 billion other nuns were present. All of them were also great arhats. Their contaminants were exhausted, their minds were freed, their tasks were accomplished, they were free from the defilements, and they had tamed their cognitive senses. They were like huge dragons in possessing great spiritual power, and were accomplished in the wisdom of emptiness. Just like the monks, when the sun began to rise in the early morning, the hair of these nuns stood on end all over their bodies, and their blood flowed so strongly that they looked like the palasa flower. Tears filled their eyes, and they felt great discomfort, wanting to give blessings and peace of mind to living beings, to accomplish the primary Mahayana practice of emptiness, to reveal the hidden teaching that is the Tathagata's skillful means, to prevent the extinction of his sermons, and to provide causes and conditions for living beings to discipline themselves. They rushed to where the Buddha was and bowed down at his feet. Circumambulating him 100,000 times, they then placed their palms together in reverence, withdrew, and sat at one side. In this gathering of nuns, they were all bodhisattvas, dragons among the people. For in rank they were firmly settled within the 10 stages, dasabhumi, from which they could not be moved. Having taken on female bodies in order to spiritually transform living beings, they were constantly cultivating the 4 immeasurable minds, and had attained positions where they were freely able to attain Buddhahood. At that time, there were bodhisattva mahasattvas as numerous as grains of sands in the Ganges River. They, too, were dragons among the people, and in rank they were firmly settled within the 10 stages from which they could not be moved. Through their power of using expedient means, they manifested themselves in their present bodies with names such as the Bodhisattva ocean-like virtue, Samutradata, and the Bodhisattva imperishable resolve, Akshayamati. Such Bodhisattva Mahasattvas as these led this group. Their thoughts were filled with reverence for the Mahayana. They were firmly settled in the Mahayana. They deeply appreciated the Mahayana. They longed for the Mahayana, and they were unwaveringly devoted to the Mahayana. In skillfully adapting to the ways of the whole world, each made the following pledge. I will enable all those who have not yet reached the other shore to do so. Throughout innumerable past kalpas, I have upheld the pure precepts, maintained well the practices, and liberated those who had not yet been liberated, thereby binding together the 3 jewels prevent their dissolution. In the future I shall turn the wheel of the Dharma, enhance it myself with great adornments, achieving innumerable merits. I will look upon all living beings equally, regarding them all as if they were my only child. When the sun began to rise early in the morning on that day, they likewise encountered the Buddha's radiance. Their hair stood on end all over their bodies, and their blood flowed so strongly that they looked like the palasa flower. Tears filled their eyes, and they felt great discomfort, wanting to give benefits and peace of mind to living beings, to accomplish the primary Mahayana practice of emptiness, to reveal the recondite teaching that is the Tathagata's skillful means, to prevent the extinction of his sermons, and to provide causes and conditions for living beings to discipline themselves. They rushed to where the Buddha was and bowed down at his feet. Circumambulating him 100,000 times, they then placed their palms together in reverence, withdrew, and sat at one side. At that time, male lay followers, upasakas, as numerous as the sands of the two Ganges rivers, were also present. They upheld the 5 precepts Pankasila, and their conduct was impeccable. Among them were the Upasaka king Tejovi Malakirti and the Upasaka Pradhanasara, who served as leaders. They came with keen anticipation to observe methods that would serve to resolve problems for them. That is, they were concerned about pleasure and pain, permanence and impermanence, purity and impurity, self and non-self, real and unreal, taking refuge and not taking refuge, living beings and non-living beings, eternal and non-eternal, calmed and not calmed, created and uncreated, relinquished and not relinquished, nirvana and non-nirvana, and superlative and non-superlative. They constantly sought to observe the gate containing the curative effect of dharmas like these, and they wanted to partake in hearing the unsurpassed Mahayana, and to be able to explain what they had heard to others. They skillfully kept the pure precepts and were exhilarated by the Mahayana. Having achieved satisfaction themselves, they sought to satisfy the aspirations of others in this way as well. They were proficient in encompassing the unsurpassed spiritual wisdom of prajna. They longed for the Mahayana, were unwaveringly devoted to the Mahayana, and skillfully adapted to the ways of the whole world, in faring over those who had not yet reached the other shore, liberating those who had not yet been liberated, and binding together the 3 jewels to prevent their dissolution. In the future, they will turn the wheel of the Dharma and enhance it themselves with great adornments. They will always be deeply absorbed in savoring the moral practice of the pure precepts, and they will all achieve merit in this way. Their thoughts will be filled with great compassion toward all living beings equally and without discrimination, regarding them as one would look upon one's only child. When the sun began to rise in the early morning, each person gathered bundles of fragrant wood, such as brown sandalwood, agarwood, oxhead, sandalwood, and other natural woods and fragrances, for the cremation of the Tathagata's body. The carvings, rough and fine, as well as the natural bark of the wood, all shone with the wondrous light of 7 jewels. By the power of the Buddha, they were like an array of multicolored paintings that held an array of marvelous colors, in blues, yellows, reds, and whites, to the visual delight of living beings. The pieces of wood all had various fragrant coatings of saffron, aloe, sal resin, and so forth. Flowers were strewn to adorn this collection, including the Utpala blue lotus, Kumuda yellow lotus, Padma red lotus, and Pundarika white lotus. And above these fragrant woods were hung 5 colored banderoles, made of a soft, sheer fabric like that used by the gods, cassia silk, or multicolored brocades woven with linen. The fragrant wood was placed on jeweled carts that gave off either blue, yellow, red, or white light. The wheel shafts were all inlaid with 7 jewels as well. Each cart had 4 horses attached to it, and each of these horses ran as fast as the wind. On the front of each cart were erected 57 jeweled banderoles, with nets woven of pure gold thrown over them. Each jeweled cart also had 50 lovely jeweled umbrellas, and from the top of each cart were hung flower garlands of blue, yellow, red, and white lotus blossoms. These flowers were uniformly made up of pure gold leaves and diamond calyxes, and numerous black bees frolicked among these calyxes, amusing themselves. In the process, the bees emitted a wonderful sound that intoned the teachings of impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and non-self, and the sound also expounded events from past lives and the careers of the Bodhisattva. In addition, there was an assortment of song and dance performances, and the playing of zithers, bamboo flutes, horizontal harps, bamboo panpipes, grand zithers, hand drums, and wind instruments. Included within this music were the words, "Dreadful, positively dreadful, the world is hollow." Before each cart, lay followers held up 4 jeweled stands, all of which were covered with blue, yellow, red, and white lotus blossoms, as well as saffron and other perfumes, ideal in their subtle fragrance. These laymen took care of all necessary arrangements to provide meals for the Buddha and the Sangha. All used fragrant sandalwood and agarwood for fuel, and cooked with water that had each of the 8 ideal qualities. The food was delicious, containing the 6 flavors of bitter, sour, sweet, spicy, salty, and plain. The food also had 3 other qualities. It was tender, it was pure, and it accorded with the Dharma. Having put together these various adornments, the laymen arrived at a grove of sal trees in the land of the Mala clan. There they went on to spread gold dust on the ground, and then covered the gold dust with cloth made of Kalinga yarn, Kambale yarn, and yarn-dyed silks. The area covered in this way reached fully 12 yojanas in size. There they constructed 7 jeweled lion seats for the Buddha and the Sangha. The seats towered in the air like Mount Sumeru and were decorated by hanging jeweled curtains on all sides. And from the many sal trees were also hung an assortment of fabulous banderoles and coverings. A variety of fragrant scents were smeared on the trunks of those trees, and brightly colored flowers strewn on the ground between them. Each of the upasakas present had these thoughts. If there are any among these living beings who are impoverished, I can help them. To those who seek food, I shall give them food. To those who seek drink, I shall give them drink. To those who seek the ability to use their heads, I shall give them intelligence in their heads. To those who seek the ability to use their eyes, I shall give them insight through their eyes. Whatever these living beings need shall be provided. For when I give in this way, I free myself from any defiled, poisonous thoughts of greed or enmity. Any lingering thoughts of mine that yearn for worldly happiness or personal comfort disappear, and I am left with naught but an expectation of pure bodhi, religious awakening. All these male lay followers were well established in the bodhisattva path. Then they thought, after the Tathagata accepts our meal, he will enter nirvana. But upon thinking this, their hair stood on end all over their bodies, and their blood flowed so strongly they looked like palasa flowers. Tears filled their eyes, and they became very upset. Now each of these people carried the materials for their offerings. On jeweled carts they loaded fragrant woods, banderoles, banners, jeweled umbrellas, and food and drink. They then hurried to where the Buddha was and bowed down at his feet. With the preparations they had brought, they thereupon made formal offerings to the Tathagata and made circumambulation around him 100,000 times, raising their voices in such a sorrowful wail that heaven and earth were moved. They pounded their chests, letting out a roar, their tears falling like rain, and they said to each other, "Listen, this is dreadful. The world is hollow, the world is hollow." Then they threw themselves before the Tathagata and blurted out, "All we ask, O Tathagata, is that you have pity on us and accept our final offerings." The world-honored one, understanding the occasion, remained silent and did not accept their offering. They beseeched him in the same way 3 times, but each time they were all refused. Their wishes unfulfilled, the laymen felt dejected and anxious. Remaining in silence, it was as if a loving father had only one child who suddenly fell ill and died, and after the remains were buried, that father returned home in disappointment, grief, and pain. The male lay followers were grieved and upset in much the same way. They then took what they had brought and put it all in one place, withdrew, sat off to one side in silence. At that time there were also female lay followers, upasikas, present in numbers that totaled the sands of 3 Ganges rivers. They upheld the 5 precepts and their conduct was impeccable. The female lay followers, dignity of life, Jivashri, garland of dignity, Srimala, and Visakha, were the leaders among their group of 84,000, all of whom capably maintained the true Dharma, Sadharma, with tenacity, in order to lead innumerable hundreds of thousands of living beings to the other shore. They manifested themselves in female bodies, yet they disparaged the domestic dharma pertaining to women. They meditated on their bodies as 4 poisonous snakes, contemplating in this manner. This body is constantly nibbled at by innumerable small organisms. This body is foul-smelling and unclean, shackled in a prison of greed. This body is as loathsome as a dead dog. This body is impure with its 9 holes from which matter continuously flows. This body is like a walled city in which blood, muscle, tendon, bone, and skin form its outer surface, in which hands and legs form its defense towers, in which the eyes are its windows, the head its palace with its mind king dwelling within. The body city like this is precisely what the Buddhas, the world-honored ones, have abandoned, and in what ordinary ignorant people always indulge themselves, where demons of craving, anger, and delusion reside. This body is not solid, much like marsh reeds, the castor oil plant, water bubbles, or the banana tree. This body is impermanent from one thought to the next. Nothing is ever settled. It is like lightning flooding water or an illusory heat shimmer. It is like painting something on water. No sooner has the form been inscribed by the brush than it is absorbed by the water. This body disintegrates easily, like a towering tree on the steep bank of a river. This body will not last long. Soon it will be devoured by foxes, wolves, kites, eagles, owls, crows, magpies, or hungry dogs. What intelligent person would take delight in the body? It would be easier to put the waters of an ocean into the fingerprint of an ox than to fully explain how impermanent, impure, and odious this body is. It would be easier to roll up the earth into the size of a date, or to continue rolling in more and more until it is reduced to the size of a mustard seed, than to try and explain everything about the faults of this body. Therefore, it is to be dispensed with, as one would expectorate saliva. With this reasoning, the Upasikas were continuously engaged in cultivating their thinking on the teachings of emptiness, signlessness, and wishlessness. They deeply sought to delve into the Mahayana scriptures, and after hearing them, they would expound them for others. They kept their vows and disdained their female bodies, regarding them as loathsome, and their gender as insubstantial. Mentally, they were always focused on proper contemplations like this, seeking to destroy their endless transmigration through samsara. They were intoxicated with the Mahayana, and as they drew from it to satisfy their own thirst, they also satisfied the thirst of others, for they held a deep longing for the Mahayana and were unwaveringly devoted to it. Although presently in female bodies, in fact, they were bodhisattvas who skillfully adapted to the ways of the whole world, in ferrying over those who had not yet reached the other shore. They bound together the 3 jewels to prevent their dissolution, and in the future they will turn the wheel of the Dharma and enhance it themselves with marvelous adornments, rigorously keeping the precepts. All of them will achieve merit in this way, bringing forth a mind of great compassion toward all living beings equally and without discrimination, looking upon each of them as one would look upon her only child. When the sun began to rise in the early morning, they spoke to each other, saying, "Today we should go to the Sal Grove." Offerings were prepared by these female followers and brought to where the Buddha was. They bowed down at the Buddha's feet, circumambulated him 100,000 times, and then said to him, "World-honored one, we have prepared these offerings for the Buddha and for the Sangha. All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity upon us and accept our donations." But the Tathagata remained silent and did not give his permission. Their wishes unfulfilled, all the female lay followers felt sad and disappointed. They withdrew and sat off to one side. On that occasion, the Lichavi people from the city of Vaisali were also present. They numbered as many as the grains of sand in four Ganges rivers. They were men, women, boys, girls, and mothers with children together with their families, as well as various rulers with their kinsmen from throughout the Jambudvipa continent. Because they sought the Dharma, they properly cultivated the precepts and practices taught by the Buddha, and were thus endowed with a dignified bearing that discouraged those from other schools of thought who denigrate the true Dharma. These people often said to each other, "We should take our stores of gold and silver and use them to ensure that the profound treasury of the sweet, inexhaustible true Dharma remains in this world long into the future. We hope we will always be able to practice and study the Dharma. If anyone maligns the true Dharma of the Buddha, we shall cut off his tongue." They also made this vow: "If any monastic violates the precepts, we will detain that person, return him the lay status, and put him to work. If there are those who deeply rejoice in and protect the true Dharma, we will respect them deeply, just as we respect our fathers and mothers. If there are any monastics that are able to practice the true Dharma, we will celebrate them to give them strength." Since they were ever eager to listen with rapt attention to Mahayana scriptures and, after doing so, then work to spread these teachings to others, each of them succeeded in accomplishing merit in this way. Among them were Lichavi children called pure unstained treasure, Visuddhivi Madagarbha, pure and disciplined, Visuddhyachanda, and permanently unstained pure ablution, Vimadaganago Daka. They said to each other, "Let us hurry to where the Buddha is right now." In the process, they prepared a variety of offerings. Each of the Lichavis participated in decorating 84,000 grand elephants and preparing wagons drawn by teams of 4 horses that totaled 84,000, adorned with 84,000 bright jewels. They collected bundles of fragrant woods such as sandalwood and agar wood. Each of these bundles included 84,000 pieces. In front of each elephant were hoisted ornamented banners, banderoles, and umbrellas. Even the smallest umbrella measured a full yojana in breadth, and the shortest banderole reached 32 yojanas in length. And even the plainest of the streamers was 100 yojanas in height. All of these offerings were brought to where the Buddha resided. The Lichavis bowed down at the Buddha's feet and circumambulated him 100,000 times before speaking. "World-honored one, we have prepared these offerings for the Buddha and the Sangha. All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept our donations." But the Tathagata remained silent and did not give his permission. Their wishes unfulfilled, the Lichavis felt disheartened. Then, by means of the Buddha's supernatural powers, the Lichavis were raised above the earth to the height of 7 palmyra trees, and there in the sky they remained in silence. At that time, there were also important state officials and other distinguished lay followers who collectively numbered as many as the sands contained in 5 Ganges rivers. They revered the Mahayana, and when people from other religious schools of thought repudiated the true Dharma, these leaders used their power to break these people down, just as a hailstorm crushes plants and trees. The principals in this lay group were known as the eminent sunlight Vairocana, the eminent protector of the world Lokapala, and the eminent protector of the Dharma Dharmapala. The offerings of this group totaled 5 times what had previously been given. They brought them into the area among the sal trees, where the Buddha sat and, bowing down to the Buddha's feet, circumambulated him 100,000 times before addressing him, saying, "World-honored one, we have prepared these offerings for the Buddha and the Sangha. All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept our donation." But the Tathagata remained silent and did not accept their gifts. Their wishes unfulfilled, these distinguished individuals felt disheartened. Then, by means of the Buddha's supernatural powers, they were raised above the earth to a height of 7 palmyra trees, and there in the sky they remained in silence. At that time there was another group that included the king of Vaisali, his queen, consorts, and their retinue from court, together with all the other kings of Jambudvipa, excluding Ajatashatru, and the people in his capital and the villages under his control. Among these kings was Unstained Moon, Vimalakandra. Each felt the need to journey to the Buddha's location, bolstered by 4 military divisions, resulting in each king arriving with 180 trillion people in their entourage. The soldiers rode in chariots drawn by elephants and horses. The elephants had 6 tusks, and the horses were as fast as the wind. Their offerings were beautiful and were 6 times the amount of what had been brought previously. The smallest of their jeweled umbrellas was a fully 8 yojanas across. The shortest of their banderoles was 16 yojanas long, and the poorest specimen of their ornamented banners still reached 36 yojanas in length. These kings resided comfortably within the true Dharma, reviling other Dharmas that are base and corrupt. They revered the Mahayana, they cherished the Mahayana. They felt sympathy toward living beings, regarding them like their own children. The fragrance wafting from the food and drink they carried filled the air for 4 yojanas. As the sun began to rise in the early morning, they too brought their assortment of culinary creations to that place between the 2 trees, where they found the Tathagata and addressed him, saying, "World-honored one, we have provided these offerings for the Buddha and the Sangha. All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept our last offerings." But the Tathagata, well aware of the situation, once again did not give his permission. Their wishes unfulfilled, the kings felt disheartened and withdrew to one side, where they remained. At that time all the imperial consorts, excluding only the consorts of King Ajatashatru, also came together, and their numbers equaled the grains of sands in 7 Ganges rivers. They had taken female forms for the purpose of ferrying living beings to the other shore, and were ever mindful of their behavior, having purified their minds by practicing the teachings on emptiness, signlessness, and wishlessness. Among them were the well-known consorts, beautiful woman of the triple world, Triloka Sundari, and beloved virtue, Priyaguna. But all of these imperial women abided comfortably within the true Dharma. They practiced the precepts that endowed them with a bearing most dignified. Filled with compassion for living beings, as if each was their own child, they said to each other, "Let us now make haste in pilgrimage to where the Buddha resides." The offerings prepared by these royal consorts totaled 7 times what had been brought previously. They included fragrant flowers, ornamented banners, colored silk brocades, banderoles, umbrellas, and a superb assortment of food and drink. Among their jeweled umbrellas, the smallest reached 16 yojanas across. The shortest of their banderoles measured 36 yojanas, and the most mediocre of their ornamented banners was 68 yojanas in length. The fragrance from their food and drink filled the air for 8 yojanas. Carrying these offerings, they went to the Tathagata, and after making their obeisance at his feet, circumambulated him 100,000 times before addressing the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, we have provided these offerings for the Buddha and the Sangha. All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept these, our last offerings." But the Tathagata, well aware of the occasion, was silent and did not accept their gifts. Their wishes unfulfilled, the consorts then felt distraught, pulling out their hair, pounding their chests, and screaming like someone who had just lost a beloved child. Eventually they withdrew to one side and remained there in silence. At that time, female deities also appeared, their number equaling the grains of sands in 8 Ganges rivers. Their leader was the goddess Wide-Eyes Virupaksha. She said the following, "Sisters, look carefully, look carefully. All these wonderful offerings have been provided by these people who hope to serve the Tathagata and the Sangha. We too should decorously provide marvelous things as offerings to the Tathagata. After the Tathagata accepts them, he will enter into Nirvana. Sisters, it is extremely rare for these Buddha Tathagatas to appear in the world. This final offering should be twice as unusual as any other. When the Buddha passes into Nirvana, the world will be hollow. All these female deities cherished the Mahayana, and thus looked forward to hearing more about it. Whenever they had an opportunity to listen to Mahayana teachings, they would then turn around and explain them to others. They were intoxicated with the Mahayana, and as they satisfied their own thirst, they also satisfied the thirst of others. They were unwaveringly devoted to the Mahayana. Whenever they encountered followers of other teachings who felt jealousy and resentment towards the Mahayana, these deities vigorously crushed them, just as hail knocks down grass. They maintained the precepts and were thus endowed with dignified bearing. In skillfully adapting to the ways of all worlds, they ferried over to the other shore those who had not yet reached it, and liberated those who had not yet liberated. In the future, they will turn the wheel of the Dharma, binding together the three jewels to prevent their dissolution. Studying the Mahayana, they will enhance it themselves with great adornments, in this way achieving immeasurable merit, and regarding all living beings with equal compassion, viewing each as if he or she were her only child. As the sun began to rise in the early morning, the female deities brought an assortment of fragrant wood, incense, and the like in a quantity double that brought by human pilgrims. The perfume from the wood was capable of eliminating a variety of the foul smells found among humans. These deities rode on white chariots topped with white canopies and drawn by teams of 4 white horses. From the top of each chariot hung white curtains that stretched around the vehicle, and on all 4 sides hung gold bells. The chariots were also filled with various fragrant flowers, fancy banners, banderoles, umbrellas, superbly prepared foods, and theatrical performances. Each had set up a lion seat for the Tathagata, the 4 feet of which were made of the pure blue Vaidurya gem. Behind each seat was a backrest decorated with 7 jewels, and in front of each seat was a golden armrest. These 7 jewels looked like the forest of lights in which the different precious stones all shone like lanterns. Marvelous heavenly flowers covered the ground where the female deities laid out their offerings. When they were finished, they felt overwhelmed with sadness. Their tears flowed and flowed, producing great discomfort in them. In order to bring blessings and peace of mind to living beings, to accomplish the primary Mahayana practice of emptiness, to reveal the hidden teaching that is the Tathagata's skillful means, to prevent the extinction of his sermons, they approached the location of the Buddha, made obeisance at his feet, and circumambulated him 100,000 times before addressing him, saying, "World honored one, all we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept these our last offerings." But the Tathagata understood the situation and remained silent without accepting their gifts. Their wishes unfulfilled, all the female deities felt agitated and distressed. They withdrew to one side, and there they sat in silence. At that time, all the Nagaraja dragon kings residing in the 4 directions came together, totaling a number equal to the grains of sands in the 9 Ganges rivers. Their leaders were known as the dragon kings Vasuki, Nanda, and Upananda. As the sun began to rise in the early morning, these dragon kings prepared their own offerings, doubling the amount of those previously brought by humans and gods. Carrying them to the Buddha's presence, they made obeisance at his feet and circumambulated him 100,000 times before addressing him. "All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept these, our last offerings." The Tathagata, however, knowing the occasion, remained silent and did not accept their gifts. Their wishes unfulfilled, the dragon kings felt dejected, withdrew, and took their seats off to one side. At that time, all the Yaksa demigod kings, led by King Vaisravana, gathered in numbers equal to the grains of sands in 10 Ganges rivers. They said to each other, "Let us hurry to where the Buddha is," and prepare double the offerings brought by the dragon kings. They then carried these to the Buddha's presence. Making obeisance at his feet, they circumambulated him 100,000 times before addressing the Buddha. "All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept these, our last offerings." The Tathagata, however, understood the situation and remained silent without giving his permission. Their wishes unfulfilled, the demigod kings felt disheartened, withdrew, and took their seats off to one side. At that time there were also Garuda bird kings, totaling a number equal to the grains of sand in 20 Ganges rivers. They were led by the bird king Arista. There were also Gandharva celestial musician kings, totaling a number equal to the grains of sand in 30 Ganges rivers, led by King Narada. There were also Kimara celestial chorister kings, as numerous as the grains of sands in 40 Ganges rivers, led by King Sudarsana. There were Maharaga serpent kings, as numerous as the sands of 50 Ganges rivers, led by King Mahasudarsana. There were Asura Titan kings, as numerous as the sands of 60 Ganges rivers, led by King Sambara. There were Danava demon kings, as numerous as the sands of 70 Ganges rivers, led by King Ganja Vimaladaka and King Bhadradatta. There were also Rakshasa demon kings, as numerous as the sands of 80 Ganges rivers, led by King Terrifying One, Bhima. Having abandoned their evil mentality and no longer devouring people, these demons produced thoughts of compassion within their menacing nature. Although they had been ugly in appearance, through the Buddha's supernatural powers, they had all become handsome. There were also tree spirit kings, as numerous as the sands of 90 Ganges rivers, led by King Fond of Fragrance, Gandapriya, as well as spell-casting kings, as numerous as 1,000 Ganges rivers, who were led by King Mahamaya Vidyahara. There were also form-craving sprites, as numerous as the sands of 100 million Ganges rivers, led by their king Sudarsana. There were also Apsara sky nymphs, as numerous as the sands of 10 billion Ganges rivers, led by Ramba, Urvasi, Turna, and Visakha. There were also Bhuta spirit kings from the earth, as numerous as the sands of 100 billion Ganges rivers, led by King White Moisture, Suklardara. There were also Lokapala worldly kings, and heavenly guardians of the four directions, who were as numerous as the sands of 10 trillion Ganges. And there were wind deities of the four directions, who were as numerous as the sands of 10 trillion Ganges rivers. They blew seasonal and unseasonal flowers over the tops of the trees, scattering them throughout the grove of trees where the Buddha was. There were also deities who ruled the clouds and the rain, as numerous as the sands of 10 trillion Ganges rivers. They were all thinking, when, upon his nirvana, the Tathagata's body is set alight for cremation, we shall pour rain from the sky and cause that fire to be extinguished. In this way, those in the crowd that are burning with agony shall be refreshed. In addition, there were great fragrant elephant kings, as numerous as the sands in 20 Ganges rivers. They were led by the elephant kings Rahu, Suvarna, Madhu, Abhinilanitra, and Gandhamadana. They revered and longed for the Mahayana. Understanding that it would not be long before the Buddha passed into nirvana, they each gathered superb lotus flowers in innumerable, endless quantities and journeyed to where the Buddha sat. Bowing their heads in respect, they then withdrew to one side. There were also lions, kings of beasts, whose numbers equaled the grains of sands in 20 Ganges rivers, led by King Simbanada. The lion kings bestowed fearlessness upon all living beings, and bringing a variety of flowers and fruit to the Buddha, they bowed down at his feet and repaired to one side. There was also a variety of flying bird kings, as numerous as the sands of 20 Ganges rivers. Their group included wild ducks, wild geese, mandarin ducks, peacocks, kadamba dark gray geese, karandava ducks, mina birds, parrots, black cuckoos, bahika herons, kalavinka weavers, and jivaka pheasants. All these various birds brought flowers and fruit to the Buddha. After making obeisance at his feet, they repaired to one side. There were also water buffalo, cows, and goats as numerous as the sands of 20 Ganges rivers. They walked to where the Buddha was, and then produced wonderfully fragrant milk in such quantity that it filled the canals in the town of Kusinagara. The color, smell, and flavor of this milk were all ideal. After completing their task, they then withdrew and took their place off to one side. In addition, the seers who inhabited the 4 continents surrounding Mount Sumeru were also present. Their numbers as numerous as the sands of 20 Ganges rivers. Their leader was Xantivadin. They brought incense, flowers, and sweet fruit on their pilgrimage to where the Buddha resided. Making obeisance at the Buddha's feet, they circumambulated him 3 times before addressing him. All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity on us and accept these, our last offerings. The Tathagata, however, understood the situation and remained silent without giving his permission. Thereupon the seers, their wishes unfulfilled, felt disheartened, withdrew, and found place off to one side. In Jambudvipa, the bee-kings were led by King Fine Sound. Bringing a variety of flowers, they made a pilgrimage to the Buddha's location. Making obeisance at the Buddha's feet, they withdrew to take their place off to one side. At that time, the monks and nuns of Jambudvipa were assembled, with the exception of the 2 groups of followers traveling with Venerable Mahakasyapa and Venerable Ananda. Also present were mountains as numerous as the sands of immeasurable Asamkaya Ganges rivers contained in the world, including Jambudvipa. With Mount Sumeru, the most prominent among them, these mountains were adorned with forests and luxuriant growth. Their trees were so numerous and their branches so plentiful that they obscured the sunlight. A wide variety of exquisite flowers could be found in every direction, and the water flowing in their springs and rivers was pure, fragrant, and clear. The mountains were filled with deities, dragons, demigods, celestial musicians, titans, birds, celestial choristers, great serpents, saints, spellcasters, and sky nymphs. All these spiritual beings of the mountains likewise made a pilgrimage to see the Buddha. Making obeisance at the Buddha's feet, they then withdrew to take their place off to one side. There were also deities from the 4 oceans, as well as deities residing in rivers, who together were as numerous as the sands of innumerable Ganges rivers. They possessed great supernatural powers that come from great spiritual power. The offerings they prepared were twice anything that had been brought up to that point. The light emanating from their divine bodies shone like stage lighting, so brightly that it obstructed the sun and the moon, making those heavenly bodies disappear. They scattered asoka flowers over the Hiranyavati river, and then came to the location of the Buddha, where they made obeisance at his feet and removed themselves to one side. At that time the grove of sal trees in Kusinagara turned white, appearing like a flock of white crane. In the sky there suddenly appeared a hall made with 7 jewels, carvings, engravings, and figured silk decorations, all of which could be clearly seen. A parapet containing an assortment of jewels surrounded the hall, and below it water flowed from a number of springs into a bathing pool, the top of which was filled with magnificent lotus flowers. It looked like something from Uttarakuru, that land to the north, or like Indra's pleasure garden, Nandanavana, in the Triyastrimsha heaven. Now at that time the Sal Grove had been decorated in a number of ways, and it struck those who looked upon it as quite lovely. The gods and asuras there could all see the signs of the Tathagata's imminent nirvana, and, without exception, each felt sad, forlorn, and unhappy. At that time, the guardian deities of the 4 directions and Chakra, lord of the gods, Chakra Devanam Indra, said to each other, "Look, see how both heavenly and worldly beings and even asuras have made such great preparations, hoping to present their final offerings to the Tathagata. We should also make an appropriate offering. If we can manage this final offering, the perfection of charity will be completely accomplished without difficulty." So the guardian deities of the 4 directions then prepared offerings that were twice what had been presented previously. They brought Mandarava flowers, Maha Mandarava flowers, Kakaloka flowers, Maha Kakaloka flowers, Manjusaka flowers, Maha Manjusaka flowers, Samtanaka flowers, Maha Samtanaka flowers, Senna flowers, Grand Senna flowers, Universal Brilliance flowers, Grand Universal Brilliance flowers, Clove flowers, Grand Clove flowers, Fragrant City flowers, Grand Fragrant City flowers, Flowers of Joy, Grand Flowers of Joy, Desire Arousing Lilies, Grand Desiring Arousing Lilies, Intoxicated with Fragrance flowers, Grand Intoxicated with Fragrance flowers, universal fragrance flowers, grand universal fragrance flowers, divine gold leaf flowers, dragon flowers, flowers from Parijata trees, and flowers from Kovidara trees. They also brought a variety of superbly prepared foods, and when they reached the Buddha, they first made obeisance at his feet. The illumination of all these heavenly beings was so bright that the sun and moon became invisible in the sky. Holding what they had brought, they then endeavored to be allowed to present their offerings to the Buddha. But the Tathagata, understanding the occasion, remained silent, thereby not accepting their gifts. Their wishes unfulfilled, these gods then felt disheartened and distressed, and withdrew to take their places off to one side. At that time Chakra and the other gods from the Triastrimsha heaven prepared offerings twice what had been brought previously, and the flowers they brought were also of that scale. They had wondrous and extremely appealing perfumes and incense, carrying Chakra's Vajrayanta palace and a host of smaller halls. When they arrived where the Buddha was residing, they first bowed down at his feet to make their salutations, and then addressed him, saying, "World-honored one, we deeply appreciate the Mahayana and affectionately defend it. All we ask is that the Tathagata take pity on us and accept our food." But the Tathagata, understanding the occasion, remained silent, and thereby did not accept their gifts. Then Indra and the other gods, unable to realize their wish, felt disheartened. They withdrew to wait off to one side. All the way up to the sixth meditative heaven, the gods in the realm of desire prepared offerings, each in turn surpassing what had appeared before. These decorated banners, banderoles, and umbrellas were so large that even the smallest jeweled umbrella covered the 4 continents of the earth. The shortest banderole stretched across 4 oceans, and the most inferior banner reached up to the heaven of Maheshvara. Whenever even the slightest breeze blew against the banderoles, they produced a sound that was sublime. Carrying the sweetest dishes of food, they journeyed to where the Buddha was, and, ceremoniously bowing at his feet, addressed him in this way: "World-honored one, all we ask is that the Tathagata take pity on us and accept these, our final offerings." But the Tathagata, understanding the occasion, remained silent and did not accept. Realizing that their wishes could not be fulfilled, these gods felt disheartened and withdrew to wait off to one side. Above the world of sense pleasure, all those residing in the Brahma world, at the peak of material existence in the realm of form only, also gathered together. At that time, a Mahabrahma king and his retinue of Brahma deities emitted a light that permeated the 4 continents. It was so bright that it rendered the light given off by the sun and the moon, and the people and gods of the realm of desire, invisible. These gods also brought decorated banners, colored silk brocades, banderoles, and umbrellas. The absolutely shortest banderole extended from the Brahma's palace all the way to this space within the Sal forest. They made a pilgrimage to the Buddha's location, made their obeisance, and then addressed him, saying, "World-honored one, all we ask is that the Tathagata take pity on us and accept these, our final offerings." But the Tathagata, understanding the occasion, remained silent and did not accept their gifts. Their wishes unfulfilled, these Brahma gods then felt disheartened and withdrew to take their places off to one side. At that time, Vimasitra, king of the Asuras, together with innumerable other Asuras and a large retinue, were also present. The light that shone from their bodies surpassed even that of the gods in the Brahma heaven. They also brought decorated banners, colored silk brocades, banderoles, and umbrellas. Even the smallest of their umbrellas could cover 1,000 worlds. With the most sublime and sweet dishes, they made a pilgrimage to where the Buddha was, and, bowing at his feet, spoke these words: "All we ask is that the Tathagata take pity on us and accept these, our final offerings." But the Tathagata, understanding the occasion, remained silent and did not accept. Their wishes unfulfilled, the Asuras felt disheartened, withdrew, and remained off to one side. At that time, King Mara Papayas, of the realm of desire, together with the innumerable endless asankaya hordes of beings belonging to his retinue, including gods and their female attendants, opened the gates of the hells and dispensed pure cold water to those inhabitants. As a consequence of this, he then announced to them, "You feel you are unable to do anything about your situation, but if you will just concentrate on the Tathagata, the one worthy of oblations, the perfectly enlightened one, and set forth your offerings to express your joy in his virtuous accomplishments, this will bring you peace through the long night that you must endure." While in the hells, Mara Papayas removed the instruments of torture and the many painful poisons. On the fiery flames he poured rainwater, extinguishing them. Then, by means of the Buddha's supernatural powers, he found himself thinking, "I will make everyone in my retinue throw down their knives and swords, longbows and crossbows, armor and other hardware, halberds and lances, crescent-plated halberds, metallic bludgeons, broad axes and hatchets, combat rings and lasso ropes." The offerings brought by his group exceeded by twofold everything previously presented by humans and gods. Even the smallest of the umbrellas covered 1,000 worlds. When they arrived at the Buddha's location, they bowed at his feet and said, "We now long for the Mahayana, and are unwaveringly devoted to the Mahayana. World-honored one, there may be good men and good women who accept the Mahayana because they seek to provide offerings, or because they are afraid, or because they intend to deceive others, or because of the prospect of financial gain, or because they are merely following others, and so they may regard it as true or as false. When this occurs, in order to eliminate the fears of such people, we will teach them the following mantra. Tarki tatara tarki lohare maha lahare arakara tara svaha. Now for those who have lost their good intentions, for those tormented by fear, for those preaching the Dharma, or for those preventing the dissolution of the true Dharma, this mantra is effective in overcoming rivals and heretical schools, in protecting oneself, in protecting the true Dharma, and in protecting the Mahayana. Anyone who uses the mantra properly will have no fear of mad elephants. Whenever they find themselves in a broad open field, or an endless swamp, or a place with precipitous slopes, with this spell they will feel no fear. And water, fire, lions, tigers, wolves, thieves, and troubles with kings. World-honored one, if one can hold on to this mantra, that person will be able to eliminate completely any fear associated with these things. World-honored one, whosoever holds on to this mantra, we will protect just as a tortoise guards his 6 extremities. World-honored one, we do not speak of this to curry favor. We will faithfully increase the power of anyone who sustains this mantra. All we ask, Tathagata, is that you take pity and accept these, our lost offerings. At that moment, the Buddha said these words to Mara Papayas. I cannot accept your offering of food and drink, but I have accepted the mystical mantra that you have explained. For I want serene bliss for all living beings, including the 4 groups of my followers, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. After explaining this, the Buddha grew silent and accepted nothing further. Mara pleaded with the Buddha 3 times in the same way, but was refused each time. His desires unfulfilled, Mara Papayas felt disheartened and withdrew to take his place off to one side. At that time, Heavenly King Maheshvara and his retinue of limitless, innumerable gods prepared offerings, the scope of which went beyond what had already been provided by Brahma, Indra, the 4 guardian deities, humans, gods, the 8 types of beings, and non-humans. The offerings of Brahma and Indra now seemed like a series of black lines on the edge of a seashell that is not fully visible. The smallest of their jeweled umbrellas were capable of covering the entire great trichiliocosm. Bringing their offerings to where the Buddha resided, they made obeisance at his feet and then circumambulated him countless times before speaking. World-honored one, what we respectfully present to you is trivial, something like what a mosquito might present to one of us, or like a man throwing a scoop of water into the ocean, or lighting one small lantern to add light to that of 100,000 suns, or bringing a flower to increase the bounty of flowers blooming in the spring and summer months. or increasing the size of Mount Sumeru by adding a mustard seed to it. How could one increase the ocean, the sun's brightness, a field of flowers, or Mount Sumeru? World-honored one, the insignificance of what we provide by way of offering is much the same. Even if we were to offer to the Tathagata oblations of incense, flowers, theatrical performances, banners, and umbrellas enough to fill the great trichiliocosm, they would still not be worth mentioning. Why? Because we know that the Tathagata is perpetually concerned with taking up the suffering of living beings in the unfortunate hell, hungry ghost, and animal realms. For this reason, world-honored one, we hope that you may look upon us with pity and take up our offering. At that time there was a Buddha land in the eastern direction, beyond infinitesimal worlds, as numerous as the sands of immeasurable endless Asamkhya Ganges rivers. The Buddha land was called mind-pleasing, beautiful sound, and the Buddha there was known as equal to space, Akasasama, Tathagata, worthy of offerings, of right and universal knowledge, with clarity and conduct perfect, well gone, with understanding of the world, unsurpassed worthy, tamer of men, teacher of gods and humans, Buddha, world-honored one. At that time the Buddha, equal to space, said to his chief disciple, "Good man, you should go now to that world in the west known as Saha. In that world there is a Buddha known as Shakyamuni, Tathagata, worthy of offerings, of right and universal knowledge, with clarity and conduct perfect, well gone with understanding of the world, unsurpassed worthy, tamer of men, teacher of gods and humans, Buddha, world-honored one. It will not be long before this Buddha will pass into extinction. Good man, you should take him fragrant dishes of food from this world. The food should be aromatic and attractive in appearance, and when eaten should bring peace and comfort. Present this food to that world-honored Buddha. When that world-honored one has eaten it, he will enter Parinirvana. Good man, you must also show him your deepest reverence and entreat him to resolve your doubts." Then, having thus received that Buddha's teaching, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Anatakaya rose from his seat, bowed down to the feet of his Buddha, and circumambulated him 3 times with his right shoulder facing the Buddha. Then, together with innumerable Asamkhya of Bodhisattvas, he embarked from that land and came to the Saha world. In response to the occasion, the continents of the great trichiliocosm shook in 6 ways. Everyone assembled there, such as Brahma, Indra, the 4 guardian deities, Mara, Papayas, and Mahasvara, saw the earth move, felt the hair on their bodies stand up and their throats become dry. They trembled with fright, each wanting to flee in a different direction. Looking at themselves, they noticed that they no longer radiated light. In fact, their spiritual powers had vanished without a trace. At that moment, Manjushri, the Dharma prince, rose from his seat and spoke to the huge crowd. "Good men, have no fear, have no fear. Why? Because to the east of here, beyond infinitesimal worlds as numerous as the sands of immeasurable, uncountable Amsamkhya Ganges rivers, there is a world called mind-pleasing, beautiful sound. The Buddha there is called equal to space, Tathagata, worthy of offerings, of right and universal knowledge, and indeed all the 10 epithets of a Buddha. There is also a Bodhisattva there called Anatakaya, who, together with innumerable other Bodhisattvas, wishes to come here to make offerings to the Tathagata. It is because of the spiritual power of this Bodhisattva that your body's illumination is no longer visible. You should therefore be joyful at what has happened rather than fearful." Then the great assembly looked off into the distance and saw the approach of that other Buddha's great assembly. It was as if they were looking at their own images reflected in a giant mirror. At that point, Manjushri addressed the crowd once more. "What you now see is the great assembly of that Buddha, just as you see this Buddha. By means of the supernatural powers of the Buddhas, you will now be able to see all the countless Buddhas in the other 9 directions." But the great assembly then remarked to each other, "Dreadful, positively dreadful, the world is hollow. The Tathagata will soon pass into Parinirvana." Then everyone in the crowd saw the Bodhisattva Anatakaya and his retinue approach. From each and every pore on that Bodhisattva's body there arose a large lotus flower, and in each and every lotus flower there were 78,000 towns. In length and width each town was equal to that of Vaisali. They had walls and moats with the 7 precious things scattered throughout, and 7 rows of bejeweled palmyra trees. The people there were prosperous, lived in peace and security, enjoyed abundant provisions, and were happy. Gold from the Jambu River was used for the coping of the gate towers, and upon each grew a variety of groves of trees of the 7 precious things. These produced flowers and fruit in abundance, which produced a subtle and marvelous sound whenever they were stirred by the wind. This sound was so elegant as to seem like heavenly music, and it gave a sublime sense of pleasure to the people in the city where they heard it. The moats brimmed with superb water that was clear, pure, fragrant, and clean like pure Vidurya. In those waters were boats with the 7 precious things, in which people rowed, at times playing and bathing in the water, enjoying themselves in endless amusement. There were also lotus flowers of an innumerable variety of colors, such as the blue, yellow, red, and white, and the diameter of each was the size of a cartwheel. On the banks of the moats were many parks with trees, and within each park were 5 natural ponds. There were also flowers growing within these ponds, namely blue, yellow, red, and white lotuses. They, too, were as big as cartwheels, their scent richly fragrant, and these flowers were loved by everyone. The water in the ponds was clear and as soft as could be, and wild ducks, wild geese, and mandarin ducks frolicked in it. Each of these parks also had a jeweled villa. The length and width of each of these villas were fully 4 yojanas in size, with walls constructed of the 4 precious stones, gold, silver, Vidurya, and crystal. Pure gold formed the edge on the perimeter fences. The ground was made of quartz with gold dust covering it. Within the villas were numerous 7-jeweled bathing ponds filled with water flowing from springs. On the edge of each bathing pond was a golden stairway of 18 steps, lined with banana trees made of gold from the Jambu River, and the whole scene resembled the pleasure gardens in the Trayastrimsha heaven. In each town were human kings numbering 84,000. Each king had innumerable numbers of consorts and female attendants, with whom the king enjoyed and amused himself happily. The other people were similarly happy, each enjoying himself in his respective abode. Here living beings did not hear of anything else of renown. They listened solely to the sound of the unsurpassed Mahayana. Within each flower there was also a lion seat, the 4 legs of which were all constructed of dark blue Vidurya. Laid on each of these seats was a soft white fabric more exquisite than anything in the triple world. On each of these seats sat a king who educated living beings by means of the Mahayana teachings. The living beings in attendance engaged in copying, reading, and reciting, and practicing what was expounded to them. By doing so, they helped spread the Mahayana scriptures. At that time, the Bodhisattva Anatakaya pacified the uncountable number of living beings in the lotus flowers, by moving them to abandon their pursuit of worldly pleasures by themselves. And yet they too all exclaimed, "Dreadful, positively dreadful, the world is hollow. The Tathagata will soon pass into parinirvana." Then the Bodhisattva Anatakaya, together with innumerable other bodhisattvas that surrounded him, manifested his supernatural powers by bringing a variety of offerings, immeasurable in scope, including superbly fragrant and attractive food and drink, and announced that anyone who could smell the aroma of these foods would have the stains of all their defilements eliminated. And by means of his supernatural powers as a bodhisattva, all the living beings present were indeed able to see these miraculous transformations. But the body of the Bodhisattva Anatakaya was limitless in size, fully as large as space itself. So, with the exception of the Buddhas, no one else was able to see the end point of the Bodhisattva's body. It was then that the Bodhisattva Anatakaya and his retinue took their prepared offerings, twice what had been brought previously, and brought them to where the Buddha was. Making obeisance at his feet, they placed their palms together in reverence and addressed the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, all we ask is that you take pity on us and accept our offering." But the Tathagata understood the occasion and remained silent, not accepting the offering. Then the Bodhisattva Anathakaya and his retinue withdrew and remained off to one side. In the southern, western, and northern directions there were other Buddha realms, from which innumerable other bodhisattvas of incalculable, boundless size also came, bearing offerings that were twice what had been brought previously. Entering into the august presence of the Buddha, they also ended up withdrawing off to one side, like everyone else. At that time, the auspicious and felicitous ground of the Saul forest was completely filled by the enormous crowd that had now gathered, and even though the forest measured 32 yojanas in both length and width, there was not an empty space to be found. The only space where all the boundless body bodhisattvas of the four directions and their retinues could sit were often no bigger than the head of an awl, the point of a needle, or a speck of dust. Nonetheless, all the great bodhisattvas of the many Buddha realms in the 10 directions, even as small as specks of dust, came and were now assembled, and all living beings in Jambudvipa had come as well. The only exceptions were the two groups associated with Venerable Mahakasyapa and Venerable Ananda, as well as King Ajatasattu and his retinue. Poisonous snakes that can kill a man on sight, dung beetle vipers, scorpions, and people who have committed the 16 evil acts, even all these were assembled there. The Danavas and Asuras completely put aside their harmful thought, and instead they all produced minds of compassion, like fathers, like mothers, like elder sisters, and like younger sisters. All living beings in the great trichiliocosm looked upon each other with the same attitude of compassion, with the exception of the Ichantikas. At that time, the ground in all worlds of this great trichiliocosm became soft due to the spiritual authority of the Buddha. There were no more hills, wastelands, sand, gravel, rocks, thorns, or poisonous plants. The land became so adorned with precious stones that it resembled the Sukhavati Western paradise of Amitayas Buddha. At this point, everyone in the great assembly was able to see the Buddha lands of the 10 directions like so many specks of dust, as clear as if they were seeing their own image in a mirror. That is how well they were able to see the Buddha lands. Then a 5-colored ray of light began to shine from the Tathagata's mouth. The light was so bright that it permeated the entire congregation, rendering the bodily radiance given off by others no longer visible. After serving its purpose, the light returned to the Buddha's mouth, from which it had come, and disappeared. When the assembled gods, humans, and asuras saw the Buddha's light return and enter his mouth, they were all seized with fear. The hair on their bodies standing on end, they said, "This shining forth and returning of the light from the Tathagata must not be without reason. It is certain that he has now taken care of what he needs to do in the 10 directions. The sign of his final nirvana, what will it be? Alas! What will it be? Alas! Why would the world-honored one suddenly abandon the 4 immeasurable minds and refuse to accept the oblations offered by both humans and deities? From now on, the sunlight of sacred wisdom will be extinguished forever. The ship of the all-encompassing Dharma will hereby sink. Ah, how depressing! The world is to be engulfed in suffering." With their hands they pounded their chests and cried out in a sad lament. Their limbs trembled and they were not able to support themselves. Blood flowed from their pores, spilling onto the earth. End of chapter 1 of the Nirvana Sutra.